tonight. So SEL, social emotional learning, we're going to refer to it as SEL. It's sort of like, in fact, it is. We call it the Common Core from hell around here. So if you're familiar with Common Core, it's a top-down kind of federalized program. And the thesis behind that was, hey, we've got a great newfangled way to make our students more intelligent and more competitive in the 21st century. We're going to give this a try. Abysmal results. And in fact, the achievement gap between socioeconomic classes, it widened big time. So the same dude that brought us that, Bill Gates, is kind of putting his foot very much on the accelerator to something called Castle SEL. It's kind of the name brand of the big SEL group. Him and Zuckerberg and a couple of the other usual suspects are investing into this program. So here's what the program is. It's a teaching pedagogy. It is curriculum. It is teacher trainings. It's all the usual things. It's texts. It's exercises. It's all that jazz, right? And it's supposed to, here's the promise. It's supposed to make kids, easier to teach and, a new and improved sort of student. So again, the promise of it, it's a lot better than it deals with in actuality. But here's the most important thing, and this is probably going to blow your mind. This is actually not cool, is that it's in literally every class. I don't care if it's homeroom, basket weaving, gym. Check this out. This is how it shows up in math. This is right from North Carolina math, how they're rolling it out. Have students generate additional vocabulary words that extend their emotions. Does that sound like an intellectual program to you? Definitely not. So again, this is the promise is to make you a wonderful person, all this stuff, but it is in fact anti-intellectual. Now, critics of the program, that would be me and maybe you by the end of this, we don't like the program at all. Not only is it anti-intellectual, it's downright manipulative with the language that it uses, with the techniques that it uses and the exercises, and we'll get to that in a second. But also, it's very invasive. So the program itself relies on copious amounts of data collection from the students in the form of surveys, writing autobiographies, doing confessionals in some cases, oftentimes without parental consent or knowledge, which is not cool at all. In addition to social emotional learning, there's got a few features. So first of all, really what it is to your point, it's not a customized solution to a problem or a boutiquing, if you will, of an educational solution. It's like a dragnet. It's a universal mental health treatment. So I want to show you part of it that really drives me nuts. I mean, I have a cursory education in psychology, not enough. But I'll tell you that this breaking down of the personhood is a huge problem with this. So what you're going to be looking at is stuff that's going on for elementary schools. But one feature is constant self-examination. Mm-hmm. Constant. This is one feature of this program where it's diaries or it's maps or I'm going to blow this up to see if you guys can see it a little bit better. But this is just one exercise. So what you're looking at, you guys, this is a teacher's guide, okay? So this isn't the actual thing, but it's asking students to journal, dialogue their journal, and visual representation. And this is ad nauseum. It's really, self-confessions, it's your family origins, etc. And it's got exercises where it really singles kids out. Right? How many of you disagree? How many of you agree? Using peer pressure as a sickening lever to try to change the baseline values of students. Students are a captive audience, as we know. I'm going to show you a couple more and just kind of get your input because I've got some real doozies. So this is social emotional learning. In my summation, social emotional learning is far more dangerous than just straight up critical race theory. It is ridiculously manipulative. There's a lot of studies where psychiatrists have done bad, right? Where they've really steered people astray. That's kind of what I see happening here, especially with young children. So here's what we're looking at. This is asking kids, do I have questions about my face, hair, chest, and body. This is a 7th grade class here, guys. And by the way, these are questions that are shared with the rest of the class. So getting children to confess very personal things about themselves, it's not just to get to know each other better, you guys. It's purely manipulative. This is in Orange County, by the way, in Chapel Hill. But this is by no means just them. Questions I have about growing up are, check all that or apply. Why am I changing? Does everyone change the same way? And when is it okay to kiss someone? Okay. And then the last one I want to share, this goes into the interrogations. You guys, interrogations are this is the crux of social emotional learning. Again, it's done in every stinking class, you guys. Math, whatever it is. Okay, it's asking questions. Here we go. About my friends. My best friend's name is. My best friend thinks that I am. Right? Something my friend does that worries me. My mom's name is. Today I would describe my relationship with my mom as, so this is grooming. What you're looking at is grooming. It is getting incriminating information about students in order to use that as leverage. Make no mistake about it. This is information, by the way, which is shared with the rest of the class. This is straight out of Mao. I'm sorry. This is a Maoist type of educational program. James, what did you think of what I just showed you?
I mean, so it just kind of, it reinforces a lot of the things I already think, having seen some of this directly. The comment that I made earlier, I want to strengthen something about it. Teachers who are doing social emotional learning in these capacities should not just be fired. They should probably be fined or arrested. They are practicing psychology in an uncontrolled setting without a license, yes, which should be overwhelmingly illegal I think it is illegal in all 50 states. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever that this should be occurring with children in like I said, in uncontrolled environments. Typically, the kinds of investigations that you're seeing happening that you just presented are the kind of thing that a therapist, either working with an individual child or adult maybe, or a small group of people, might try to work through in a controlled setting, very clearly and deeply getting to know the patient in that situation before engaging in interventions of this type. And I've actually spoken to a couple of psychologists who are appalled when they have seen things like this, because they say that this if they tried to do this in an uncontrolled group setting, even with a license to practice psychological medicine, they could risk losing that license. And the fact that teachers are doing this with children in group settings where they don't know they can't know what's going on with everybody, and the attempt to find out has to violate some kind of privacy, is just unconscionable, and in fact is probably illegal. It's just a matter of figuring out who can make the legal arguments that can point that out. My opinion would be that teachers that are doing this are not qualified to do this. So something that exists and might have benefit in certain circumstances is being taken out of that circumstance, which would be a controlled, properly therapeutic environment being put into a public classroom where it's going to be shared across groups it's 7th grade. That's one of the most socially awkward and personal, and like freaking out about everything. I saw something about my lips, hair, breasts, whatever are like whatever. Are you kidding?
It's incredible. Well, look at this one. This is unreal. So these are, by the way, instructions for the teachers. So anytime you have stagecraft and a recipe and a cookbook for something, you're dealing with some shady stuff. And this is the way that Mao did it. Stagecraft. Getting children to separate from their parents, from their history, from their culture, from their background. Why? To be able to accept a new one. So breaking someone down is the first step of brainwashing. You can call it what you will, of manipulation, whatever. There's a lot of experts disagree on the term. Whatever it is, breaking them down is important. This is what breaking them down looks like. 7th graders, let's say you've got 30 in a class. You have to self-identify. Okay, as these teens will have to self-identify. What do you think about the Pledge of Allegiance? What do you think about video games? What do you think about this? In other words, you're isolating. Isolating. It is abusive, and children are having to suffer this abuse alone by themselves because, as you point out, James, that nobody's given this information up. There is zero transparency and even less accountability in schools right now. Look at this. Here's another game. Here's just another way of getting students to confess. They're to make a star with 5 points, and those 5 points are going to contain personal information about you or your family, and you're going to go all around the room, and you're going to show the star to people and see how many people agree with you, how many people match up with the stars. I mean, and by the way, this is all being done in the same type of class.
Right. Yeah. So this is an attempt to create consensus around whatever opinion is going to be enforced with the most dominance. That's what it is. You get people to expose, what do you think about the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, if it's going to be portrayed that the Pledge of Allegiance upholds white supremacy or whatever, and that's going to be a big deal, now you've got a bunch of kids who are, even if they do support the Pledge of Allegiance, are now not going to be willing to admit in front of all their peers that they're the ones who support white supremacy. This is a means of generating consensus and conformity. And like I said, it's completely out of the teachers are not qualified to be engaging in these interventions, which no qualified person would possibly do to them. And so you have this kind of like double problem. And like you said, anybody who disagrees is now going to have to retreat and disagree within the context of their own mind. They're isolated. They feel like the weirdo. They feel like the person out. And this, of course, causes psychological discomfort. All of this is so grotesquely inappropriate and so far divorced from what any positive view of social emotional learning ever would have been, that I don't hesitate. Anybody teaching this should be removed from their jobs and possibly prosecuted. They are practicing psychology without a license. And as a matter of fact, they're not even practicing psychology. Like you said, they're practicing Maoism, and they're manipulating and psychologically injuring teens without any standing to even engage in the practices. And they're not in an environment that should be allowed to use those practices. The shame is that there are not enough clinical psychologists speaking up and saying these things, because when I say them, they're like, oh, well, James Lindsay's unhinged. If clinical psychologists would actually speak up and say, in my professional opinion, this is completely inappropriate for an average 7th grade teacher with an education degree to be doing in a classroom full of, vulnerable adolescents who are going to socially weaponize this stuff against their peers. And this is going to cause XYZ problems down the line, that would be a much different thing. So anybody who's watching who is a clinical psychologist who can get this in front of a clinical psychologist, really, we need an army of clinical psychologists willing to start speaking up and saying, this is completely inappropriate. This should not be in our schools. Our teachers are not, it's not only are they not qualified, it's not even their damn job to do this. It's not your job. Your job is to teach whatever set of subjects that you are licensed to teach by the state of, whether it's North Carolina or Texas or Tennessee or whatever, not to do psychological interventions and manipulations upon your students who, I just want to just say the same thing over and over and over again. It's just so grotesquely inappropriate. It's very difficult for me to see any of this stuff and it shock or appall me, but I have qualified as shocked and appalled.
And what I